Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole for the Sunshine Coast Regional District of Thursday, July 28th, 2022. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for being here today. And I would also like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District operates within the territories of the Sechelt and the Squamish First Nations, and we're very grateful to be here to live, work, and play. We have a lengthy agenda in front of us today, and before we move to adopt the agenda, are there any other additions, subtractions, hopefully no multiplications, but divisions I will take? Anything from staff or directors? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda, please. So moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you, motion carries. Actually, technically, it's not an amended agenda. Yeah, but I will ask before we go into our presentations and delegations today, I'll ask for a motion to receive all reports, delegation materials, and all items on the agenda, please. So moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. So first up, we have our presentation and delegation. We have Richard Cook, Jennifer Tybert, and Lacey Barr of Eric Lees and Associates regarding the cemetery master plan. And before we do the consultant presentation, I'll just pass it over to our GM of Community Services, Shelley Gagnon, and she will introduce and we'll go from there. So over to you, Ms. Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Based on a report from 2011, which identified at that time that the demand for internments would exceed supply at Seaview Cemetery within 10 years, funding for a cemetery master plan was approved in 2018. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, that project didn't actually launch until late 2021. An internal project team has worked side by side with Lees and Associates for the past 6 months, and are very pleased to present to you today the 2022 Cemetery Master Plan. This plan provides a roadmap to inform decisions for the continued provision of cemetery services. Information from the plan will help guide future service planning priorities for the board's consideration during the annual planning and budget approval cycle. Staff recommend that the 2022 Cemetery Master Plan be adopted as a planning tool to help guide these future planning considerations and priorities. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the project team, which include Kevin Clarkson, Jerry Couchery, Dan Flatt, and Andrew Jackson for all of their time and effort in assisting the consultants. Kevin would have liked to have been here today to present the report, but he is on annual leave, and the timing just didn't work, so his regrets from Manager Clarkson. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Cook from Eric Lees and Associates, along with his team, who are here this morning to present you with an overview of the Cemetery Master Plan. After the presentation, both staff and the crew from Lees and Associates would be pleased to answer questions that you have. And with that, I will turn it over to the delegation. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, GM. And over to you, Mr. Cook, and your team.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just hold on one moment while I share my screen. Can you just confirm you can see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. We're delighted to be here to present the key findings and recommendations arising from the Cemetery Master Plan project. You've got a busy agenda this morning, so we're going to keep this to as close to 10 minutes as possible. I'd like to just thank Shelley and Kevin and the team for partnering with us on this project. You can see that my team, I led this project, ably assisted by Jennifer Tybert, our business manager, and Lacey Barr, landscape architect, and Kristen Oates as well. The SCRD has 3 cemeteries. Seaview Cemetery is the SCRD's only active cemetery. Mount Elphinstone and Pioneer Cemetery is currently closed. And of course, Pinedale Cemetery, which began burials in the early 40s, but then was closed to burials in 1982 and remains closed. So the SCRD has served its communities and families for many decades with care and compassion, and it wants to be able to continue to provide this essential service for generations to come.
Richard, I'm just going to pause you for just a second because we're having a really hard time with your audio. And I'm not sure, I don't think it's our system. I'm thinking it's your microphone. There's a setting on Zoom, an automatic setting. Alton, do you remember what that is?
Yeah, if you go into your audio settings, just down in the bottom corner, you click the little up arrow next to the audio, and you go into audio settings. There's a checkbox for automatically adjust microphone volume, and if you uncheck that, that might help things out.
So just run that through me one more time, please. I've got the mute button going down to the menu.
Yeah, in the right next to where you'd mute and unmute yourself, there's a little up arrow. And you click that, and then you click audio settings. And then under microphone, there's a checkbox that is automatically adjust microphone volume. And if that's checked, it can cause some of the problems that we're hearing.
Let's try that. Is that better?
Yes, actually it is. That's what the problem was. Thank you, Richard. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's much easier to hear you now. Okay, please keep going.
That's great. No, thank you for letting me know. I should have just checked the audio worked, and Zoom has these automatic things which sometimes you don't realize kick in. Okay. Shall I just continue from this slide, Chair?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Richard.
Okay. I don't know whether you heard me, but I was just saying that the SCRD has served its communities and families for many decades with care and compassion, and it wants to be able to continue providing that essential service for generations to come. We found that, and essentially because of that, to that end, there's an urgent need to develop a new supply of graves before Seaview Cemetery runs out, because we found that SCRD communities are growing by about 10% or will grow over the next 25 years by that amount, from somewhere around 31,000 people to over 35,000 people. The death rate is expected to rise from 11 deaths to 12 deaths per 1,000 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that uptick does have an impact, especially with the passing of the beginning of the baby boomer generation. And Seaview Cemetery is running out of developed burial inventory. There's only 2 or 3 years left of traditional in-ground casket lots. There's only 2 or 3 years left of columbarium, those are the above ground niches, that's the cremation niches. But there's a plentiful supply at the moment of in-ground cremation lots. And over the next 25 years, we found that SCRD is expected to sell approximately 550 in-ground lots, approximately 175 columbarium niches, and about 210 in-ground cremation lots. So as a result of these findings, it's recommended that the SCRD increases the supply of graves at Seaview Cemetery by developing what we called the infill areas. Those were areas A, B, and C, to provide an extra 2 years of full body casket burial capacity, because it's the biggest land user, and that will buy a little bit more time. But to work on creating the new burial area on the undeveloped lands in the southwest corner of the cemetery to provide about 15 years additional full body casket burial capacity. And then, of course, there's the opportunity to expand the cremation garden and provide a further 15 years or so of cremation niche supply. We're also recommending that the SCRD begin the land acquisition process to purchase new lands to provide capacity for the 100-year horizon. Now, that sounds a very long time, but in terms of cemetery timescales, it's actually not, and this is not a process that you really want to be repeating in 5 or 10 or 15, even 15 years' time. So this is the interment and memorialization diagram, and it shows the locations of the infill areas and the cremation garden expansion area and the proposed burial section in the southwest corner of the cemetery. I think it's self-explanatory. This is the concept design from the master plan report for the cremation garden, and it shows how it could be expanded with a range of cremation and memorialization options, which could include more community columbarium, some family columbarium along an infill pathway or walkway, family vessels, and a memorial wall, which doesn't necessarily need interments to go with it. This is the interment and memorialization diagram for the southwest corner of CV Cemetery, and showing how it could be developed to provide approximately 15 years of in-ground casket burial and a plentiful supply of columbarium niches. We're estimating 35 to 40 years. But it could also include a green burial area as well. And this plan is a flexible plan with a mix of options that can be adjusted in future phases to reflect the burial preferences of families at that time. This cross-section is simply conveying the experience of being in this beautiful and sacred burial area. You can see the walking path down the centre, the columbariums, and the main burial areas, possibly to include some scattering in the cremation garden. So as cemeteries are also becoming increasingly park-like in how they form and function and serve many communities, the SCRD may wish to improve the landscape standards at not just CV Cemetery, but also to some degree at Mount Elphinstone. We can get on to that in a moment. But those things could include enhancing the main entrance gate and sign, providing an information kiosk with a cemetery map, improving the cemetery driveway surfaces, some of which have been the victim of the flooding and the strong storms of last November, providing new bins and benches. Also to plant new trees, not just to protect and buffer the cemetery from the noise and the impacts of the highway, but also to ensure that there's going to be a wide age range of trees which are healthy, and to ensure that the tree canopy is there for many years, because it is a defining element of CV Cemetery. We also want to ensure that the impacts of the creek are understood, especially as climate change impacts all of us more, and making sure that that doesn't impact adjacent roads. Mount Elphinstone Pioneer Cemetery presented a different set of challenges. It's a beautiful and tranquil parkland, but it's on the side of a mountain. And really this land is too steep and rocky for large-scale traditional cemetery development and suitable for modern municipal cemetery operations. But we do see an opportunity to develop small cremation gardens and green burial areas in a series of phases, subject to further analysis of the ground conditions. Or again, we can improve its amenity value if it's going to simply remain as a parkland for the community. So this concept diagram shows how the property could be utilised. You can see in the top left corner here, the site of the existing Pioneer Cemetery within the perimeter, which is articulated by this red dashed line. You can see here the green dots representing small green burial areas or pods nestled within the trees, or where there's space or where the land is flatter. Similarly, the purple dots represent small cremation gardens nestled in this landscape, connected by scattering walks and memorial trails represented by the black dashed lines. You can also see some of those more amenity elements, like a new entry gate, a new sign, a new information kiosk, upgrades to the driveway approach, and upgrades to the parking lot, would all help the amenity experience to people visiting the cemetery and parkland. In terms of the key cemetery system-wide operational issues, it's recommended that the SCRD update the cemetery bylaw, but also to begin the process of educating families, particularly on the rules around grave adornments, and this will really help the cemetery team look after the cemetery more efficiently and to a higher standard. And we're also recommending that HRD undertakes a business plan, which would include a review of the perpetual care fund, which is essentially the pension for the cemetery when it closes and no more revenue is generated. It's also recommended to fully utilise the power of the Stone Orchard Cemetery software, which you already have, I should say, to help track the operational work and the administration work, to understand the costs of running the cemetery system, and to better integrate that record-keeping software with the SRD's financial management systems. So certainly the business plan piece and better understanding the operational costs are all aimed at improving the long-term financial stability of the cemetery system. So in summary, the essential recommendations are to provide more burial capacity at Seaview Cemetery, to begin the land acquisition process to ensure that you have sufficient capacity for the 100-year horizon, and to implement those operational items like the cemetery bylaw update, the business plan, the education to families, and the systems integration piece. The non-essential but the nice-to-have recommendations include exploring the viability of developing the cremation gardens and the green burial options at Mount Elphinstone Cemetery, and to do those amenity upgrades, which would include improving the parking, the entry gates, the trails, and the historic interpretive signage at Mount Elphinstone Cemetery. That concludes the presentation. Thanks for listening.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Richard. I'll get you to stop sharing. Oh, perfect. Done. I will ask too, the presentation that Mr. Cook has done, it's a great synopsis of the report. Is it possible to get a copy of that and post it on the as part of our materials for the public, because it's very digestible?
We can provide that to Shelley, and you can take it from there.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, so for any of the questions, the way we'll deal with the presentation and delegation, and then the Cemetery Services Master Plan, which is an item number 3 on our agenda, or Annex A, which is pages 1 to 89, which includes the entire plan from the associates, is our questions can be directed either to our GM of Community Services or to the delegation as we go through, and we'll deal with item 2 and 3 kind of at the same time. Okay, directors? So I have Director Ties and then Director McMahon.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, and I'm a little bit conflicted around cemeteries. I'm somewhat fundamentally opposed to somebody getting a plot of land for the rest of eternity. And I know that some graveyards in Europe, where space is a little bit more at a premium, have gone to a lease model where you have 75 or 100-year turnovers of plots, and you basically just get dug up and the space is made available again. Has that been in any way discussed, and is that an option that we could potentially pursue? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Currently, the reuse of graves on a term lease basis in its simplest form in the European model is illegal in BC. So the Act does not permit it. There are hybrid models which are being pursued by places like Mountain View Cemetery in Vancouver, which have very specific rules around grave reuse. But until Consumer Affairs Consumer Protection BC and the minister in charge wants to change the act, that's not really feasible in the models that you refer to in Europe.
Thank you. Director McMahon and then Director Hiltz.
Hi, I spent yesterday reading this plan in all of its detail. There's a huge amount of information in here, and it outlines very clearly, I think, some of the challenges that we've got going forward. I would be willing to, receive this as consultants' recommendations, but as a master plan, when we have never even discussed this, and there are a lot of implications, particularly budgetary implications, which we don't even know what they are. I have a lot of problems with it. So, just in general, a lot of the plan seems to be about lawn worship. Like, the reason that adornments are a problem is because we have to maintain the lawns. And there's a whole lot of stuff in here that's all driven by the necessity of maintaining lawns, but there's a lot of options now. There's a lot of people are developing no-mow alternatives to the traditional lawns, which are possibly even more resilient to climate change as well. So, those are the sort of options that I would like to see us look at as ways of reducing maintenance, rather than taking away people's untidy aesthetic, which in fact I love. I think an untidy aesthetic is entirely Sunshine Coast, and very appropriate for our community. So, there's a lot of implications here. The idea of putting washrooms in the cemetery is a whole nother budgetary implication, let me put it that way. And what to do with Mount Elphinstone Cemetery is a question that we need to discuss, I think, in detail as a board and with the community to see what the community wants to do. It's very clear that the community wants things like grave adornments, which is a phrase I'd never heard before, and what we're supposed to do is educate them that they don't want it. And I kind of have trouble with that. So I'm just going to say there's a lot of interesting things in here, some really good suggestions, some obvious things that we need to do, like fix the creek that runs through Seaview Cemetery. We need a much better solution to that before we've got a disaster on our hands. But I'm just not ready to jump on board with these recommendations as they stand.
I see Jennifer Tybert, you have your hand up, so I'll go over to you, Jennifer, and because I imagine you have some comments on that.
Thank you very much, Lori. I just wanted to clarify that there are two key issues aside from aesthetics, which can be subjective, with respect to adornments or ornamentation. First of all, some communities have found them to be a safety hazard, particularly with items that can be breakable or items that people stumble over, and that has been a liability issue for some municipalities. So there's that as a safety issue to be considered. Secondly, aside from the lawn worship idea, there often is a direct cost with respect to operational efficiency and having to move items and make sure that items belonging to families aren't damaged. That can be so a time and material cost that can be reflected financially to the municipality. So these are other, certainly, we don't want to put the impression that it's purely an aesthetics concern. There are other considerations to think about. And honestly, we encourage community engagement, as well as informing them this isn't just about us wanting to have a nice, clean, green lawn, because there are other factors that we have considered here.
Okay, I will continue through our speakers list. I have Director Hiltz and then Director Beamish.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. My question is about the land acquisition. which is, you know, the long-term view. And so my question is, what would make an ideal parcel of land for a cemetery? Sunshine Coast is, you know, maybe land challenge from a pricing point of view, but in terms of zoning, you don't want a hillside, you know, what would make it ideal? Like, what would we actually be looking for? Thanks.
Richard, go ahead.
Thank you. I should have waited. Apologies, Chair. Thanks for the question, Mark. Clearly, the steepness of the slope is a key issue. It's already challenging for staff currently to be burying or setting up graveside ceremonies on the slopes in the western part of Seaview Cemetery, which are at about 12%. That raises concerns from a health and safety perspective, but also challenges in terms of the installation of grave covers and the markers themselves. So number one, it's slope. Number two, it's depth to the water table, because we really want to make sure that there's a clear and dry horizon down to at least a metre below the bottom of the grave. That's what the World Health Organization is their best practice guidance. And also that there are not rocks and wood and other pieces of debris in those soil horizons. So using a site that's had fill material dumped in it can be challenging because there's construction debris and things like that. So it really needs to have, it's really the soils and the slopes which are the key issues.
So would above a landfill, like after a landfill is closed, would that be a suitable location for a cemetery?
It all depends on the ground conditions that we would encounter.
Okay.
If it was possible to import 6 feet of fill on top, then there's a cost of doing so. If the landfill appears to be organic in its nature, maybe it was an old orchard, maybe there was something like that, then it could be easier. If it's got fridges and cars in it and construction debris, concrete, then that's less likely to be acceptable for cemetery purposes.
So the question, so it's the suitability in the neighborhood, I guess, is, you know, like, would people, like, does it need to be close to residents, this type of thing? I was being a little bit facetious about the landfill, but it may be one of our largest parcels in the future that is an open green space. So I was just, you know, neighborhood acceptance, is this always an issue, things like this?
If you look around BC, many cemeteries are in proximity or bounded by residential areas. Mountain View Cemetery, the most densely populated area in Vancouver, is surrounded on all sides by residential areas. City of Surrey Centre Cemetery, bounded by new cemetery development. The cemetery was already there, and new housing estates are being built up around with no qualms. So these things are personal rather than kind of social.
Okay, I see Lacey Barr has her hand up. So Lacey, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to jump in that one thing about cemeteries that sometimes isn't thought about is that they are places for the living. Although they are storing the dead, it's for the living. It's for people to go, to remember, to grieve. So yeah, the vicinity of what cemetery is located to is important. You don't want it next to a really busy industrial site that has lots of noise. People might not appreciate going to an old landfill. So yeah, the location does matter.
Okay, I have Director Beamish and then Director McMahon.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the report. I really welcome the reconsideration and examination of the current cemeteries that we have. I would encourage any member of the board, if they haven't visited the cemeteries, to go and take a look. Because at the Elphinstone Cemetery, the historic cemetery, I stumbled upon. And what a pleasant place that is. And what a lot of history. I mean, especially from the Gibsons' perspective, recognizing the street names and locations in the town from the names of the people who are buried up there. I've never seen anybody else up there, though, in the times that I've been up there. I think it's probably not that well known as a location. It's at the end of a very rugged little lane that people kind of have to wander down almost by accident, because I don't recall there actually being maybe there is signage at the front of the top of the lane. I don't recall there being good signage. You don't, not till you get further down that there's a gate. But I would encourage to be, as Director McMahon says, receive this for information, and then get out and take a look before you actually make a decision. Visit the sites and see what is and see what the potential is compared relative to this report, because I think there's a great deal of potential. The columbariums, I think the expansion of that program, I think is ideal. There are different models throughout the world. I'm reminded of one I read about in Thailand when I was working in Houston, and we had a cemetery up there where it's a drill core. I mean, you drill a deep hole in the ground, put a 4-inch drill pipe in there, and people get their remains put down in a little box or a little tube and stacked until that drill hole is filled and another drill hole is available. It takes up no land. It's just straight down into the ground, and it's but there's nothing to go and visit and remember your family members by, so it has no historical relevance. But I would encourage you to visit the cemeteries before you make that final decision on the direction you want to take, because I think that'll help you to see what's there and see what that potential is. So thank you for the report.
Director McMahon.
Yes, I really enjoyed the understatement on page 52 that said that the Elphinstone Cemetery is not intuitive to navigate to. I think it's actually one of the best hidden cemeteries anywhere. I, for years, thought it would be on Cemetery Road. Silly me. That would be much too simple. That cemetery, by the way, has a unique history. I strongly support the green burials thing, but for a long time, the Elphinstone Cemetery was one of only 2 in BC that permitted burials without the green burials anyway. And so it has, and the history of the Devlin family, who were founders of the Memorial Society of BC. I mean, there's a huge amount of history there. And I would certainly support, more signage and so forth. But in terms of where we're going in future and whether we really want to be big time in the cemetery business, we have not had that conversation as a board. The last thing I want to do with the very limited land that we have around here that has good topsoil is to bury people in it. Sorry, also not going to irrigate dead people when we've got, problems just with drinking water for the living population. So, so many cans of worms here, and I shouldn't say that, should I? Oh dear. But yeah, I would be happy to receive this report and then look at, of course, some budget proposals associated with some of the more urgent matters identified in here. But in terms of a going forward thing, broader discussion. Thank you.
Over to our corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Procedurally, I just want to be clear, if the plan is not adopted, staff will not have any capacity to action any of the recommendations within the plan. And further, if the board wishes us to bring budget proposals forward, there would be some sort of motion that would have to be made to that effect.
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up, corporate officer. I was going to say that as well, that we have received this report. Just because we've received the report doesn't mean that we've endorsed every recommendation that's within the report. And if we approve it as a planning tool, there still has to be a process to bring forward each and every item in it. So because they have to come forward as budget items. I'll go to Director McMahon first, because I know that's the crux of your issue right now, is you don't want to approve it as a planning tool because your concern is then we're going to do everything within the plan.
My concern is that it sets policy going forward, because when we are, looking to make decisions, we go to our master plans And we look at them as statements of direction or policy, and I'm not sure we're there yet.
I'll look to staff. GM Gagnon?
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the question because I think it's an interesting, we're just sitting here, the corporate officer and I, going back and forth on the semantics of adopting it or receiving it. And I think where staff is struggling is that we have an immediate need to continue with the provision of cemetery services that we are committed to in Seaview. And if we're going to continue with the provision of cemetery services, we are going to run out of inventory. And without the ability to action and bring forward for board approval some of the recommendations in here, we are going to be unable to action some of the things that we may need to do in the very near future in order to meet a demand. So the reason that staff chose the wording of adopting as a planning tool is, in my experience then, it's a roadmap. Similar to the Transit Future Action Plan, in that you haven't committed to anything financially, you haven't committed to anything policy-wise, but it does provide that roadmap in order for staff to bring back those priorities and those budget proposals. So I'm not sure if it's just a semantic thing right now. Certainly the corporate officer and I are chatting about it, but staff does know we do need to action some things. Would want the planning tool adopted so that we can bring those forward through budget. But again, I'm just not sure if receiving it for information gives us that directive or if adopting as a planning tool does that. So I don't know if the corporate officer can share a little bit more.
So there's the work plan in terms of how we're conducting our cemetery work as it exists. However, if there are specific recommendations within this planning tool that staff do wish to act upon, we would need the board to adopt those to authorize our ability to implement.
Okay, I'm going to go, Director Hiltz, I still have you, but I'm going to go to Director Seegers first, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I'm going to refer you to page 6 in our package. On page 6, it talks about estimated supply, inventory, plus capacity on the far right. Then it talks about short-term strategies and long-term strategies. And I think what we're hearing here is that while we need capacity, we're not aligned on what the long-term strategy is. But short-term, we know that work has to be done because we're going to run out of capacity in 2 to 3 years. So I'm wondering if we could make the recommendation such that it would read, and that the 2022 Cemetery Master Plan be approved as a planning tool for short-term future cemetery services and infrastructure priorities, which would allow staff the guidance to be able to do the short-term work, but that would give us some time to do the long-term consultation. I mean, one of the things that a couple of us have been talking about is this a business a regional district should be in? I mean, and that would be for our consultants as well. Is this typically a government service, or in other areas, is it something that, they have private cemeteries? I know that my hometown, both cemeteries are private. So I don't know if that's something different in BC or not. So maybe that's a conversation. Maybe the funeral home wants to get into actually having the cemetery site as well. Don't know. We haven't had those conversations.
Okay, and I see Jennifer has her hand up, but it's also, just to tag on to that, churches, places of worship, they often look after their own cemeteries, as well as we do have an example on the coast of the Pender Harbor and up in Area A, and I just confirmed with Director Lee too. There's a cemetery there on Warnock Road it's run by non-for-profit, and it's a lot of volunteer groups that are looking after it. So I mean that is a longer term conversation. But Jennifer and Rich, I'll go to Jennifer and then Richard, and then I'm going to continue with my speakers list here in the boardroom.
Thank you very much, Lori. This is a very common discussion that is occurring across the country. And I can tell you that currently it is considered to be the standard practice for municipalities to provide cemetery services as a community service. There are a number of reasons for this. First of all, it is a consideration of affordability. Almost always private cemeteries are much more expensive to community members than what is provided by the municipality. Obviously, there are other social considerations, such as what's considered to be indigenous individuals who obviously will not be able to afford interment, and inevitably the municipality often has to make some sort of arrangement for that. And often it is viewed by the community, often unfavorably, if that long historical service provided by a municipality is suddenly to stop. It is often not well received. So those are the common considerations. Many provinces run into the situation of what happens when many religious cemeteries managed by churches are often not funded well enough in the perpetual care area, and then the care of the cemetery gets abandoned, the site gets run down, and in provinces such as Ontario have made it part of their legislation that municipalities are obligated to inherit responsibility for the care of any abandoned cemeteries. So they inherit that responsibility, and then they have no control of how it got to that state. So there's an element of control that running a municipal cemetery does have in being able to meet the needs of its community members by being in the service. But again, we could do an entire report on this by itself. So if that's an area you further wish to explore, we can certainly answer questions and looking at working with you more. I can tell you that community engagement on that decision will probably be an important key step to get their feedback on that. That will mostly directly impact them in a few ways, especially at their time of deepest need, when they've lost someone they care about.
Yes. Richard, I noticed that you put your hand down, or did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Just one thing, just building on what Jennifer said, and that's really that it's the barriers to exiting the cemetery business are greater than you might expect, as Jennifer outlined to go. So that's really all I'd like to say, Chair.
Okay, so I'll continue through my speakers list here. I have Director Hiltz and Director Toth. Well, yes, and Director Toth hasn't spoken yet, so it's up to you. Oh, okay, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Hiltz. This is just a planning tool. Is it perfect for our local needs, desires, community wishes? I don't think so either. I think there's definitely things in it that don't quite jive with sort of, local customs. But budget proposals still need to come forward for discussion and approval on work that we want to do. I think that we could spend days discussing the merits of green burials or full body burials, or burying people at the landfill, or watering our dead. But I don't think right now is the time for it. I think we should adopt it, and we should, sit on it and work through some of those short-term things and have that larger community conversation about whether it's the way that we want to go. So having said all that, I'm actually happy to move the recommendation on page 1 as presented.
Okay, so Director Toth would like to make that as a motion. Do I have a seconder for that? I have a seconder from Director Hiltz. Director Hiltz, would you like to speak as well, because you're on the list? Speak to the motion on the floor.
Sure, I'd like to speak. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. A comment on the motion, then I had a question on the report. So a comment on the motion.
Yeah. Oh dear, yeah, sorry to hear that, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Bill,
right.
mute yourself, please. There we go. Okay, we got it.
Go. Yeah, so I seconded the motion. I'm fine with the way the recommendation is, and I agree with Director Toth. This is a planning tool. Financial decisions will come forth. Staff need this, so I'm good with this. And you know, one of the things that keeps coming up is the long-term view, the 50, the 100, the 150 years. That came up in landfill discussions, this long-term view. And if I was to make a bet of the institutions on the coast that is surviving in 150 years, I'm going to say it's the SCRD. It might not be a private funeral home. It might not be a church. So I believe we will be a standing organization forever, essentially. So, so I'm okay with not having the discussion about is it a service that we want to be in or out. So I'm okay staying where we are. Can I ask my question about the report? The question was about the noise abatement. The idea of these being a tranquil place, a place for people to go and reflect, to encourage people to go. And right now, our cemetery, Seaview, is right beside our main corridor, one of the busiest intersections going. And the effectiveness of landscaping as a noise buffer opposed to something like a berm. And so part of that question goes, right now there's a picket fence, which I don't think works very well for noise abatement. There's some very large mature fir trees. And was there verification of the property line with respect to the fence and the trees and the proposal for the landscaping? Was that verified as part of this plan? Like, or is there already an encroachment with that with the picket fence that's there? And the quality of noise abatement with berms and trees, and what's an effective way, because it is a very noisy place there. Thanks.
Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question, Mark. We're confident. We didn't get down to that granular level of legal boundary, which trees are on which side of which trees are on the other side. But what we do know, having visited that cemetery and spent a long time there, is that the far eastern corner, in the triangle of the wedge where the two highways come together, is the noisiest part of that cemetery. But many other, and then of course anywhere nearer to the northern boundary of the cemetery is impacted more by animation of vehicles slightly flicking past you, but also a bit more road noise. But simple landscaping treatments with shrubs and a buffer and trees really help to take away your perception of noise. And although it's not a horrendous place, it is noisier in the eastern part. And through those landscaping exercises that we suggested with a bit more buffer and trees, it just helps it feel more tranquil.
Okay, Director McMahon and then Director Lee.
Right. So I'm actually going to speak against Director Toth's motion because this has been described as a roadmap, and it's not a map for where I want to go, and it's not a map that we have discussed with the community. I think that's a particular thing because this is a very personal thing to the community and how people feel. And I think we should have this conversation. So while I am perfectly happy to go ahead and pass a bunch of the key recommendations, which I completely see need to be actioned, I'm going to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Okay, Director Lee and then Director Beamish.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for mentioning Forest View Cemetery. It's a very old cemetery in Pender Harbor, and it's well visited by the people that live there. It's amazing how many people you see there. Volunteer labor just recently renewed it and cleaned it all up and put actual picnic benches in because people come and stay. And we got to remember that the historical aspect is very important. You don't hear about these people unless you go to the cemetery and read the headstones and realize they were there before us. I was confused about the term master plan and how we got here. Because when we do the water master plan or the solid waste master plan, we do a lot of community engagement before we adopt it. And yet this is the first time we've seen it, and we're being asked to adopt it. It seems quite rushed. I am aware that it's budget cycle and we have to do some of this work. But is there some way we can adopt it and revisit it, or what the heck would you do? That's my one concern. I would like to have those questions answered before I vote. Thank you.
I'll look over to staff to see if you have any thoughts.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the questions and the deliberations. It's very good information. The funding was approved back in 2018. So, and when I go back to that budget proposal, there was not talk about community engagement. There was talk about getting a plan in place to be able to meet the current demand and to be able to, sustainable service, et cetera. The funding approved was fairly minimal, which would not have incorporated community engagement. So we took what we could from to get the important pieces from a scoping perspective to get the plan that's in front of you. So I will agree that the short-term pieces of it are critical in terms of the continued provision of the service. If there are issues, the intent would be to enact some of these recommendations, like what to do with Elphinstone. To me, that starts with community engagement. So you would see when we got to the point of, okay, we need to now think about Elphinstone. The proposal that would come forward would most likely be, we need to have community engagement, we need to put together, are we going to keep it as a park, or are we going to develop it into the areas that we can from a cemetery perspective? So I see there's a lot of next steps in here. As Mr. Cook mentioned, use words like we may choose to, or we could. That is certainly how we're approaching this. There are essential recommendations that we need to do, and there are things that we could choose to do. So if there's a comfort level by the committee to put forward a recommendation around this sort of short-term, essential, immediate needs, administratively, that is at least gives us a starting point. But I'd leave that to the will of the committee and the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Lee?
No, thank you. It explains it very well.
Okay, I have Director Bamish, then Director Ties.
Question for the consultants, and that is that my recollection is that cemeteries are deemed contaminated sites. And as such, for example, any well you have had downstream has to be approximately 300 meters, as I recall, from a cemetery. I have looked at that in Houston. But any expansion of the Elphinstone Cemetery, I guess my only concern would be that the columbariums, things that do not lead to contamination of the ground, because it does sit on the aquifer that we all in this area drink. But is there any risk of contamination in terms of looking at a new location? Does contamination have to be factored in? Thank you.
Mr. Cook, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Mayor. As part of any exploration of an expansion of a site, whether it be Elphinstone or a new site, those sorts of due diligence questions are part of the sitting out and the consideration given prior to any procurement of new lands around that site suitability. So those questions would come through there. Different municipalities, different provinces have different rules around well offsets and things like that. Oftentimes there are requirements, certainly with Consumer BC, to ensure that they are aware of those things before things like that proceed. So it's not a showstopper, but those things get considered as part of the due diligence process and considering that.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Ties, then Director Seekers.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm more in the camp of going with short-term necessary steps and then revisiting the long-term plan, because yeah, I don't think continuously having to buy more plots of land to bury more people is a sustainable model, with the taxpayer always being always under an increasingly larger burden for upkeep of these spaces. So yeah, I think short-term solutions should be, or short-term measures need to be considered, but it's certainly not in favor of going for the current master plan. Thank you.
Okay. Director Seekers, I have you next, and I have an assumption that you might be bringing forward an amendment.
No, I think at this point, I'm not in favor of the recommendation on the floor. I would put forward a motion after.
Okay.
That would be slightly different, but I'm not in favor of the motion on the floor for all the reasons already stipulated.
Okay. Is that, that's what you had to say? So, okay, perfect. Okay, Director McMahon?
I'm just going to point out, having read the budget project status reports for 4 years, it was a cemetery business plan that was approved, not a master plan. And that's frankly what I was expecting. And master plan does indeed sound like it's something that we have put through community consultation, and we haven't. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, that's the end of the speakers list. So I'm going to call the question on the motion on the floor, which is the recommendations that are on the staff report on page 1, that the 2022 Cemetery Master Plan be approved as a planning tool for future cemetery services and infrastructure priorities. So I will call the question. All those in favor of that motion? I have 1, 2, 3. Which puts me at the, I'm going to vote against it because I think I like the what's going to happen after this. So, so that doesn't pass, and I will go over to Director Seekers for a motion.
Just as a point of order, you didn't actually call for those opposed.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please call for those opposed.
You're correct. Okay, so those opposed. Okay, so the motion is defeated. Thank you for reminding me of the point of order. Director Seekers?
Thank you. I would move that the 2022 Cemetery Master Plan be approved as a planning tool for short-term future cemetery services and infrastructure priorities, and that an engagement plan be put together to take this out to the community for input for the long-term direction.
Okay, and do I have a seconder for that? I see seconder. Okay, thank you, Director Toth. Any further discussion or clarification needed from staff? Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the timing of the public input, and would this be a potential budget, I would expect. So would that be part of the recommendation that an appropriate budget proposal be submitted then? I
think that's a given for staff, unless they want it specifically in the motion.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the engagement piece, that they would need some bucks for that.
Yes.
GM Gagnon.
So I'll answer a question with a question. If the engagement piece is for the long-term considerations, is there a time frame that you want that to happen within, or is that something that would come forward when staff and the service is in such a point where we need to start that consideration? Or are you wanting that to be done sooner than later?
Director Seekers?
Thank you. I'll make an amendment to the recommendation on the floor that a budget proposal for the engagement for the 2023 budget be brought forward.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment? I see a seconder for the amendment. So discussion on the amendment on the floor. So that's for 2023 budget proposal for engagement. So my first question is going to be to staff. Is that reasonable for a 2023 budget for community engagement on a long-term cemetery plan?
The request to bring forward a budget proposal for engagement is certainly reasonable, and then it will be up to the board to consider that in relation to the other budget proposals and priorities that are presented at that time as to whether that is a timing or where they want to go. But certainly to put the proposal in front of the board with the budget, I think is reasonable. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I have quite the speakers list that's appeared. So this is just to the amendment on the floor about the budget proposal for 2023. So if you would like to speak to the amendment for the budget proposal for 2023, I'm going to ask that you raise your physical hand rather than your electronic hand. So I have Director Seegers.
Thank you. Given the implications, like staff are already saying that we need work done now, and this is a long-term plan, but not that long-term. We're looking probably 4 or 5 years out. If the community wants us to acquire land, et cetera, I think this needs to move forward soon. So we have the consultation and the direction to provide the direction that staff need. So I would, I'm looking forward to having it come forward. And yes, that's a conversation at budget as to where we will allocate our communications staff, right?
Okay. Director Lee, specific to the amendment on budget 2023.
Yes, I believe the amendment is suggesting that we continue work on the plan in 2023 and get a budget proposal. My question is, would that still allow us budget proposals for the short-term work in 2023, as well as the long-term work?
Thank you for the question and seeking the clarification. The way I understand the motion on the floor to read is that you are approving the short-term recommendation, so that would give me the action I require to bring forward budget proposals to consider the immediate needs, to be accompanied with a budget proposal around community engagement around the long-term recommendations within the report, is what I have interpreted with that recommendation, if that is indeed, with the resolution. So if that is indeed what that resolution is intended to do, then I think we are aligned in our thinking.
Yes, with the amended, if the amended resolution passes, yes, that's the, yes. So first let's pass the amendment, or let's talk about if anybody else wants to speak to the amendment on the floor regarding long-term, regarding the budget proposal for 2023 for long-term engagement of the cemetery master plan. So that's the amendment that's on the floor right now. Anyone else wish to speak to that, please raise your physical hand. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Thank you. None opposed? The amendment passes. So now the amended proposal on the floor is for the immediate priorities of the cemetery master plan be actioned by staff, and that there be, the amendment piece was around the 2023 budget for long-term community, or for engagement around long-term cemetery plan. That's a good synopsis, I think, of everything that's there? Okay, I will go now to the virtual hands on my desktop. I have Director McMahon and Director Ties.
If we approve this as a draft plan, then I could probably move forward. I'm just worried that once we approve it, it will become enshrined, and in 4 or 5 years, people will just think it's just this plan, and that engagement and the changing it part could get lost, because we have a lot of, balls in the air and a lot of priorities. Thank you.
Okay, are you actually proposing that as an amendment? As a secondary amendment?
Actually, I would if I could remember what we were moving.
So what we're moving is, sorry, I'll go over to the corporate officer, please.
I was just going to suggest that you have an amended motion on the floor, that you deal with that first, and then move on to further discussion if that doesn't pass. You already have an amended motion on the floor, so don't make another amendment, would be my recommendation to the amended.
It's fair. We could do it, but that's a fair comment, corporate officer. I like to make sure that you're pleased, so. Okay, so Director McMahon, if we can put a pin in that maybe until after we deal with this. I know
Yeah, sorry. I did want to get the word draft in there, and if we pass this motion, then I think that ship has sailed. So, in that case, I would vote against it. Thank you.
Okay, and to speak to that, in my way of thinking, that the way I feel is this is a planning tool where there's a lot of excellent value in everything here, and I think the way we're moving forward, I'm happy with everything and the way we're moving forward. So I'm going to go to Director Ties, then Director Seegers, and then I'll come back to you, Director McMahon.
Well, it's probably not helpful for me to suggest another amendment. Well, I'm just wondering if we want to be a little bit more specific around short term and what that actually defines. Whether, there was mention on the floor about 4 to 5 years, but right now, when we're talking about cemeteries, short term could be 25 or 30 years because people are there for a long time. Yeah, so just wondering if we need to be a little bit more specific, but since there's no interest in making any more amendments, I may be talking in vain.
Okay, Director Seegers.
I am going to propose an amendment. I hear what the corporate officer says, but I am going to propose an amendment. I'd like to insert one word, and that the draft 2022 Cemetery Master Plan be approved and the rest as it is. Because I agree with Director McMahon. If we say this is a cemetery master plan, it's assumed by the community, it's adopted. If we still consider it a draft and we go out for engagement, then it can inform the master plan. So I'm going to propose that draft be inserted in front of 2022.
So before I look for a seconder for this amendment, so this motion came forward as a new motion. So we can actually do another amendment to it because we can do 2 amendments to a motion before we should actually delete it and start fresh. So I think this is germane to the motion on the floor, so I will ask for a second for that amendment for the insertion of draft, and I see that as a seconder. So I'm going to call the question on the second amendment for adding the word draft, does anyone wish to speak to the proposed amendment of adding the word draft in? Please raise your physical hand, Director Lee.
It's the same question as before. If we had draft, does it change your original comments on going forward for short-term and long-term and going to the community?
I want to, first of all, thank the committee for their grace in powering through this. My first note to myself is, what am I going to learn to not get here again? So I appreciate the position that I have put the board in with the resolution that I have in my report. And I would like to suggest that it is staff's opinion that the amended resolution that is on the floor provides me direction to address some immediate needs that I need to through priority planning and budget planning. And that I think I'm confident that we will be able to move through this in a way that satisfies the challenges I think the board is struggling with right now in terms of words like master plan, long-term planning, et cetera. So I'm comfortable with what is being presented, and then we will probably circle back and figure out some clarity, and you'll see clarity through the budget process as well in terms of what comes forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, GM. Director Toth, to the addition of the word draft.
I'm sorry, Chair. I won't support this. I think we've proposed adding draft in the wrong spot. We approve draft plans all the time, and that makes them final. I think what we should have done was approve it as a draft planning tool. You know, might be semantics, but there it is.
Okay. So for anyone else that wishes to speak on the addition of the word draft before cemetery master plan, I'm going to call the question on that amendment. All those in favor? Those opposed? Would you like that? No, okay. All right. So we have an amended motion in front of us. Would anybody else like to speak to the amended motion or have that read back? I think read back, please, Autumn.
Thank you, Chair. And that the draft 2022 cemetery master plan be approved as a planning tool for short-term future cemetery services and infrastructure priorities. And that a 2023 budget proposal be brought forward for a public engagement plan for community input on the long-term direction of cemetery services.
Okay. Okay, okay. Director McMahon.
I'm just going to apologize for not having thought this through in advance, obviously. In retrospect, I think if we had retitled this, because everybody's telling us it's a planning tool, so why is not the title planning tool instead of master plan? However, I can live with this motion since we have laboriously crafted it on the fly. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to call the question because my speakers list is empty now. And on the amended motion that's on the floor, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
I've never seen so much interest in a cemetery.
There's been a lot of interest in a cemetery there. So thank you so much to Richard and Jennifer and Lacey. It was a pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for sticking with us for our very interesting discussion here.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with Jim, Daniel, and the team, and it's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you for having us. We've really enjoyed being here today.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. I have a request for a 5-minute break. Would everybody like to stretch through? And then we are going to power through the rest of this agenda. So we will be back here at 10:50. I'll even give you 6 minutes. So thank you. thank you, and welcome back to the Committee of the Whole for Thursday, July 28th, after that very lively cemetery discussion. Sorry, punny, I know. Before we delve into the agenda again, I'm going to go to Director Hiltz because he just had a question/comment. If Director Hiltz, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chair. So it is a follow-up question, and I spoke to GM Gagnon about it. So my question kind of goes like this. In the procurement process of getting consultant reports, does the SCRD specify the report formats in some way? Because my experience with the last report, I'm going to call it the master plan just because that's the title of it, it was a struggle to go through. The multiple columns, the pictures that weren't relevant to material. It's a beautiful document. And in a sales office, I could absolutely say that's a great place for it, but I don't think it's appropriate for us for decision makers. And having so many different reports coming to us in these various formats, I find it hard to assimilate this information easily. So that's the question is, how far does the regional district go in its procurement of these reports in specifying how the reports are going to be formatted for our consumption of information? Thanks.
Okay. Any member of staff want to take that or take a swing at that as an answer or to answer that, or just maybe, because it was very difficult to read with the small font. So I'll go over to the CAO.
Yeah, unless one of the members of staff that happen to be on the Zoom meeting have a specific answer to that question, I do not know. I don't have the depth of knowledge into the intricacies of the procurement process to know how prescriptive we may or may not be on the formats of the reports we receive. We would have to research it and get back to you.
I think for the biggest thing, it's more of a comment from us than but it also it was very difficult to read the size, even with screens and being able to zoom in. So I'll go to GM Gagnon and then over to Director Seekers.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the comment. As I age, I don't disagree with that either. It was very small font. To answer your question, we do not specify in our RFPs. We usually talk about how many hard copies we want and in what format we want it saved, but we don't get into the particularities of the actual format of a document. That being said, I am happy to take that back to our communications folks and to our SLT to have a conversation about what that might look like from a corporate standards perspective to enable the multiple ways in which things are viewed online, your electronic agendas, and then what, the final document looks like. So I'll take it back. We'll have a conversation because currently we don't, but I hear you in terms of I think what you're asking for is just make sure that whatever's presented has an ease of read and is appropriate for the audience that it's being provided to.
Okay, thank you. Director Seekers, please.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that forward to the senior leadership team and communications. I think what I'm hearing here is we want to see that. I mean, for us and for the community. So somehow we're looking to staff to make that happen. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, we're going to go to the next item on our agenda, which is Annex B, the Budget Project Status Report. So this is number 4 on your agenda, Annex B, pages 90 through 107 of the package. I think we will just jump in. And so for anybody that is following along in the electronic agenda package that is on our website, the page numbers are going to be a little bit different because most of us here in the boardroom are also following along with printed copies, and between the formatting, there's a little bit of a difference between page numbers of the as we go through. So I'm going to be working off of the printed package, so that is If you look over on the left-hand side, the far left side of the budget project status report, that's line numbers 1 through 8. And I'm going to look to directors to see if you have questions or comments on any one of those items for staff. Director Seegers?
Thank you. I'm looking at actually line number 1. It's talking about COVID restart funding for the boardroom here. And it seems that the boardroom is looked at as a complete package. And I understand that because there has to be integration. But I think what we're recognizing already is we need chairs, we need microphones. So I think those two do not necessarily have to wait until the rest of the information or the rest of the information is gathered and the plans put together. I know District of Sechelt, we have portable microphones. So they're not attached like this. You can move them all over the place. And we got them as a set. They have batteries. So, I mean, there are some solutions I think that could be implemented without having to wait for this whole piece. So I personally would like to see that moving forward. We're jockeying for chairs up here, and we haven't got a microphone for a delegation. So there are some immediate needs we have. Thanks.
Okay. Corporate Officer, did you have a comment or on that? Because that's your purview.
Thank you. No, the comment is noted, and I will follow up with our procurement division to see. I know that we do have a proposal under development that is looking at the project in terms of it being a package, and we do have some limitations in terms of the existing equipment in here. We've been looking high and low for replacement microphones, and they're so out of date, we cannot get one. So I will speak to her to see if there's in the meantime, type of interim plan that we can look to implementing.
Okay, Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Line number 5. It's about certification of recognition, and there's a reference to a WorkSafe BC inspection report, and I'm not sure if there's. I'm trying to understand the connection. What was the inspection report and how that relates to certification of recognition? Thanks.
Okay, I am going to go to Senior Manager Jerry Parker. Mr. Parker, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And we recently had a WorkSafe inspection that actually has placed the SRD in a PACE program. It's the WorkSafe BC program that actually compels us to take an entire look at our entire safety management system. It relates directly to CORE, to Certificate of Recognition, because that's exactly what CORE does. It asks you to take a look at every aspect of your safety management system, identify deficiencies, come up with a plan to address them, and it's already a lot of work, but it's continuing to be a lot of work, but it's moving us forward in the right direction. So that was just a way of providing the board with an update. Thank you.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Between item 1 and item 3, I think it's to solve our hybrid meetings problem, including the APC going to hybrid as well. Would this include the hardware, software, everything that makes all of the meetings work in that manner?
Yes, absolutely. The meeting management software is really secondary to the boardroom reconfiguration, is the kind of the hardware installation of what we'll need. And then the meeting management software will knit that together to facilitate internal process for generating agendas, as well as publishing and facilitating the hybrid meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. So I will now take your attention to line numbers 9 through 14, page 2 of the printed package for directors. Are there any questions or comments on lines 9 through 14? Director Lee and then Director Seegers.
Thank you, Chair. Line number 9. By reading this, it assumes we don't need more room in Field Road in the near future. Is there any comments on when we will have to be planning for more room in Field Road, or is this too early to predict that?
Which member of the SLT would like to take that on? Because that's, manager is SLT, so. The whole, Tina? If she's, oh, there she is. I see her.
Thank you,
CFO.
Chair. So I can comment on the Field Road aspect. And at this particular time, it has been assessed that from a square footage perspective and a reallocation, there is a sufficient amount of space for the near term for Field Road. We also have several other planning projects underway that might also impact some of the space at Field Road, such as our Mason Road space needs. And so if various services within other divisions move in various locations, then that could impact. So I guess what I'm saying is it's an evolving thing. And at this particular time, we do have sufficient space to accommodate several other staff. We also have changed the model of work, which is through a hybrid or alternative work strategy, which means that from a scheduling perspective, we have shared office spaces where we haven't before, as well as people working both in the office and from home. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Director Lee.
So there probably won't be a budget item in 2023 for more space in Field Road, more physical space, or a new Field Road or an expansion to Field Road. That's correct then, eh?
No.
No, you won't have a budget proposal, or yes?
No, we would have to take on a significant amount of additional staff to do that. And also there's several areas that could have shared workstations. So as an example, I believe some of the directors attended the launch for the new Maple Room inside that has 10 shared workstations as an example. So those are not being occupied. So again, that's about 10 workstations. So I would not foresee us having to do a significant amount of space reconfiguration or alterations to the building for a number of years. Having that said, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know what new services the SURD, if we did expand significantly, that would change the environment. But at this time, no, in the next 1 or 2 years, I would not foresee us needing a significant budget proposal.
Thank you very much. That's good news.
Okay, the Maple Room. Okay, I need to have another tour. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Director Seegers.
Thank you. This is a follow-up to that. I think the reason, and you can clarify this for me, I think the reason that we're saying we don't need sufficient or additional space right now is because of our working model. If we were to indicate that all staff needed to move back into the building, we would not be able to accommodate that on a full-time basis. Is that correct?
That's actually, we've just done an assessment, and we actually, if we had everybody return to office and we had a mandate to that, we actually have 4 extra spaces. So actually we do have space for everybody. We're actually, if anyone's walked around, we are modifying several spaces. So in the reception, so we are splitting large spaces into half, and we are in a lot of shared space. So yeah, we have, as of the last count, 4 extra desks. Again, that's a moving target. We continually update it. So, and there's still some modifications still in the works.
Excellent. So no need for a second or a third floor then. Okay, Director Seegers, I see your hand still up. Anything else from pages 9 through 14?
Yes, number 10. It says new finance resource starting in September. I just want to say congratulations on that. I know that's been a long time coming, yes, and it's much needed capacity for the finance department. Lines 12 and 13, this is talking about privacy impact assessment with regard to CCTV and security. And I'm wondering if staff have reached out to the RCMP. The RCMP are very clear on what is allowed, what is not allowed with regards to privacy, with regards to cameras, particularly on private property or government, you know, and what they're doing. So I'm wondering if that's, I just want to offer that. I know we've had conversations with them in the district of Sechelt.
Corporate officer or GM Gagnon, any comments or around that?
Corporately, I'll just add that we do have a video surveillance policy that we look to assist us in the implementation of video surveillance, which is the highest form of privacy invasion as recognized by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. So that it's a very internally regulated process, and we have to ensure that whatever we do put in place is accessible for things like FOI, and that we have the ability to review footage, and that we limit it to specific business needs.
Okay, great. Okay, I am going to take us to the next set of line items, which is lines 15 through 21. So once again, that's on the far left page, line 15 through 21. Any questions? You can wave at me, raise your electronic hand. Director McMahon.
Not so much a question, but I notice on line 21 and some of the subsequent lines that we have finally got new port staff working. So it looks like we're starting to make progress on the ports, and that is really good news. Thank you.
Terrific. Anything else? Lines 15 through 21. We'll flip the page, and lines 22 through 29. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Line number 22 on the New Brighton dock study, just looking for some details on the sort of the cost aspect of including the major inspections, and would that be coming out of the 25,000? And a little bit further on, and I understand there's this ongoing communications with the New Brighton Dock Committee, which is really appreciated, but if you could say anything about that as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, GM.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. So the cost of the major inspection on New Brighton Dock would come out of the approved budget. There have been conversations with the nation as well around the potential for a cost share, and I just really appreciate the relationship that we have and the conversations that we've been having to work together. And so that's been appreciated. We'll see where that one ends up. And ongoing conversations with the New Brighton Dock Association, just in terms of, I try to keep them up to date on what's happening. And really what we're concentrating on is that major inspection and getting that done so that we have a good understanding. We are also including the other four docks that we have on Gambier in this initial major inspection as well, so that we kind of have an overall picture of the situation on Gambier Island. Had a good conversation with our MP last week as well around New Brighton Dock, and potentially any further advice or information that can be provided by the province. And so I know that there's been advocacy at your level around that as well. So we just keep conversing with those people that have information, and really look forward to getting this major inspection going, because that really, in my mind, would begin to frame some of the conversation that we would have with the community afterwards as well, in order to understand the community's response to that. Thank you.
Great. Anything else for lines 22 through 29? See none, I'm going to go to lines 30 through 34. Once again, those are on the left-hand side of your package for anybody that is following along electronically. Line 30 through 34. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Line 39, the new grant opportunities were identified. And it's sort of a two-part question. It's, I hear that everyone is always looking for grants. So I guess so looking for ports grants, would the ports division take, or sorry, Recreation, would they be taking that lead, or like, how are they identified? And as one question, and if you could say anything about the grant opportunity.
So line 33 about.
Line 33.
Yep.
What the new grant opportunity is, and then just a little bit more detail on how they're found. Like, is there one person scouring everything, or is it always department to department? Just a little bit more detail for that.
So is it like a scavenger hunt?
Yeah.
Or does, yeah.
Yeah.
How is, so I'll go to the CFO, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can maybe start with this, and perhaps the CAO wants to chime in as well. So it's a team effort. The way we attain grant information comes through various different means of communication through the various granting agencies. So we try to share that, and what we do is we do have a database, and it's the role of the budget and financial analyst, who then provides a report to the board and to the community on a biannual basis on the grant opportunities, the various ones that we've been successful with, as well as the types of grant status that we have. So we have many applications that are in line. So again, we try to ensure that we have a centralized location for that particular information, and we reach out to the various divisions as to what projects they may have. From a procedural perspective, we do not necessarily have a very clearly defined process on whether or not we seek grants out for new projects, or if we seek funding for already identified projects, which means they may be in a feasibility stage or defined within a type of master plan or service plan, which means that we're intending on doing those particular projects versus we had no real, there was a project that would match a grant, but we didn't have it identified as something that was a priority corporate or strategically from the board's strategic plan. So again, those are the types of things that we're working on internally from a procedural perspective, because again, there are resource implications sometimes to taking on grants that you really didn't intend on in your work plan. So those are some of the mindful conversations that we have through the divisions. Again, the divisions too are sometimes often the subject matter experts. And so they often are required to give information to apply for the grants. CAO, did you want to also add on?
I think the CFO covered it very well. The only addition I would have is that while we don't have a sort of a prescribed grants policy in terms of this is the ways in which we would pursue them, as a general rule, it's not particularly strategic to have available grants drive your work plan, but it is very wise to have your work plan to aggressively pursue grants, every grant available that is in line with your work plan. And in addition, while you can't always be shovel ready, you can try to be as grant ready as possible on as many projects as possible, which would allow you to reshuffle priorities. Maybe something you were thinking of doing 1 or 2 years from now becomes something that you're going to do next year because an amazing opportunity for a project you'd already identified has dropped out of the sky. One of the biggest challenges is often these large programs. Some of these granting programs are huge, but they have a very tiny window for which to apply. So there's always that challenge, especially when we have so many things on the go, to be ready in a position where when the magic grant program drops out of the sky, we're actually well positioned to apply for it and be competitive when we do.
Terrific. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any electronic hands or physical hands, so we will move on to line items 35 through 41. Line 35 through 41. Director Hiltz.
Yes, me again. Yeah, line 35. The July 14th update, I'm interested in the process, like when things become unsuccessful and then you enter into negotiations with suppliers. I'm just trying to, I guess I'm trying to understand what that means. When if you're unsuccessful and then the procurement has entered into negotiation, are those the same things? I'm not sure if that's explained it. I don't quite understand the difference when it's unsuccessful and you still need it and you can engage directly with the supplier, I guess that might be more kind of how I'm understanding it.
Okay, GM Gagnon, do you want to take a swing at that one?
Thank you, Chair. My swing is going to be a bunt because I don't want to quote something that I don't really know. This is a procurement world. What I can assure the board is that we follow procurement rules and we follow the requirements of the trade acts. So if there's a desire to sort of understand the steps in procurement and what happens along the way, I'm certain that we can do a lunch and learn and have our procurement expert provide that information. All I can assure you is that we are following the rules and in trying to secure the materials and resources we require. Thank you.
Terrific. That bunt got you to first base. That's great. Perfect. Thank you. Anything else for lines 35 through 41? Moving on, lines 42 through 47. Line 42 through 47. Boarding now. And going on through lines 48 through 54. 48 through 54. Going once. Oh! Almost got there. Director Ties.
I see on line 52, and that the lower road retaining wall is being repaired, or at least in the planning of being repaired, which triggered me to the separated bike path beside the highway, and that that culvert that got blown out in the storm last November. And I'm wondering, I'm guessing there's no budget proposal for this because we haven't seen it on the budget. So how would that end up being on the budget? And I guess it would need to be a budget proposal for this year. Is that correct?
GM Gagnon.
Thank you for the question, Director Ties, and the opportunity to provide an update on the Roberts Creek Multi-Use Trail. We were very pleased to have some collaboration with Modi in terms of the donation of culverts in order to be able to address the repair that they so lovely created the need for during the flood. So I really appreciate them coming to the table to work with us. Now we are in the process of getting our permits in place and the engineered drawings in place to be able to fix it. And we are attempting and hopefully be able to do the repair within our existing budget this year. But it is, the permits, as you well know, take time, and approval on the design takes time as well, but it is in the works. Thank you.
Yes, it is very generous for opportunities for repair. Director Ties, follow-up.
Quick follow-up. Just wondering if that could be something that we could use our gas tax funding for.
GM?
I guess my response was, once I get the engineered drawings and cost estimate, again, my hope was that I could do it within my existing operating, repair, and maintenance budget this year. If that's not going to be possible, then I would certainly have to bring a budget request forward, and we would explore the funding opportunities at that time.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I would like to go back to items 44 and 45 and simply to say I really appreciate the progress being made. It's been like 4 years and you've got this happening within a year. It's very much appreciated. So thank you for both of those projects and moving them along.
Okay. All right. So anything else for lines 48 through 54? Or pages previous? Director Lee.
Too fast.
I'm going too fast. I've got a corporate officer cracking the whip on me today. So Just kidding. All right, we will move on through line items 55 through 66. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I believe item 62 is changes to the transfer station in Pender Harbor, but it also includes the share shack. I was wondering if we could move the share shack up and get it opened again. It's really, I believe the share shack's got very little to do with the overall changes that are required on the site. It's going to stay there, and it's just buildings that need to be fixed. So any comments on that?
GM Rosenboom.
Thank you for the question. I know I have to remind myself by reading some documents that there was an earlier discussion with the board on the reopening the share shack at Pender. So I will revisit that and see what we can do to open it up if that's indeed possible, because I agree that there might be some opportunities there. I will follow up there. Thank you.
Yes, if my memory serves me right, I believe there was a motion to keep that share shack open, but anyways, that'd be cool if we get it done. I'm getting lots of questions on it, so.
Okay, Director Seegers.
Thank you. Line 65. So it indicates that stage H plus is full, and we needed to look at how we deal with that, and it was to be initiated in Q1 and Q2, and I see it's not started. Do we have any update on that?
Thank you for the question, Director Sears. The initiation of the project still was dependent on two components. One is the having enough staff capacity to actually manage the project, and the second one was the on Tuesday we discussed the opportunity to maybe extend the lifespan of the landfill, and those two are connected. That the component need to be answered first before we can complete the design of the area that need to be closed off. So we hope to be able to initiate that process, the project quickly. From a regulatory perspective, there's no issue here with these delays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else up to line 66? Okay, Director Lee.
Should never give me a paper copy. I can write lots of notes on it. This is just a comment, a question. On line 66, we talk about doing a waste composition study. Do we do that after hours, or do we wait till people like me come in and then catch us?
Thank you for the question. We'll actually take the bins that are normally going with the waste that's brought in. So the waste is first collected in bins, and instead of those bins going up to the active phase, they're intercepted. So we're not taking individual loads from residents. We're taking the combined loads from residents in a full bin. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I went into the transfer station the other day, and there was a guy there with a pipe pole checking. I thought, I'm going to get caught.
Note to staff, always check Director Lee's garbage when he goes to the landfill transfer station. Okay, anything else to line 66? We will move on through line 67 through 81. Once again, anybody following online, lines 67 through 81 are located on the far left side of your package. 67 through 81. Alrighty. We will move on through lines 82 to 96. 82 through 96. 82 through 96, last call. Moving on, lines 97 through 116. Director McMahon.
Yeah, this is just a comment, and I know we have staff problems, but it's a little distressing to see on line 107 that something that is an imminent asset failure is not started because we have staff vacancies. That's really unfortunate. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good point to bring up. It is. Anything else for lines 97 through 116? Okay, lines 117 through lines 129. 117 to 129. Director Hiltz.
I'm just enjoying your countdown. It's just great. Line 126. Big project, and it's kicking off, and whether there's any updates in terms of, it'll be exciting when it gets done, whether there's anything you can say about staff capacity or anything like that that's going to help out with getting that done. Is I do note that it's a $7 million line number, and we also have a $400 line number, so I almost feel obligated to ask about the $7 million line number and let staff say something about it, so thanks.
Okay, GM Rosenboom, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. The good news is that last Monday we had a new manager capital project starting. So we now have two, and the new person starting, Brian Shoji, he will be the project manager for this project. So this project, while it's still recording here as started, it's now actually started and will ramp up in upcoming weeks and months.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm on the same line item, number 126. I notice under the description, and Sechelt Indian Government District is crossed out because initially that was the proposal and that is not what went forward. Have we given staff direction to initiate conversations, or is that something that we still need to follow up on with regards to the Sechelt Nation or SIGD with regards to water meters and water service?
GM, do you want to take that, or CAO?
I can give her first response, and if desired, the CEO can always follow up. We've had initial conversations with the SIGD on this, and at that time there was no appetite from them to install water meters. Further discussion, of course, can still be had to explore that further, but it was last year they said they were not interested in funding any water meters on their property. So it would be the SRD that would need to fund it 100%. And given that's outside of our regional water service area, we cannot fund those from this grant.
Okay, follow
up, yes. I understand that that's the current position. So what you're saying is we have not indicated to staff that we should engage in further conversations, perhaps at an elected level or perhaps a combination. So we have not given that direction is what you're saying at this point.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll follow up with that later.
Director Seegers, did you have anything else on those items? Okay. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, sure, I'm going to follow up on the water meter issue. So while you might not have consumer meters, but has there consideration for like a zone meter to get a greater understanding of the consumption of that area? I'm not sure how many houses are and what kind of data that the regional district obtains from that relationship of providing water. So has that been a consideration for, in lieu of the consumer having more of a utility meter for that area? Would that be has it been considered? Thanks.
GM Rosenboom?
Thank you for the question, Director. This question was raised previously as well by the board, and since staff are looking into it.
Okay. Anything else for lines 117 through 129? we will turn the page and go through lines 130 through 137. 130 through 137. Sorry, Director Hiltz is giggling over here on my left, and I just can't stop laughing too. So, okay, lines 138 through 155. 138 through 155. Oh, Director Seegers.
Thank you. Not any specific line, but as I think it was Director Hiltz was referring to staffing shortages. And I did notice as we go through a lot of these, some of them are paused. There's, a number of them are paused because we don't have the staff to actually deliver on them. So I think it would be, I'm not looking to GM Rosenboom about this, but I'm wondering if our manager of HR, senior manager of HR, could comment on some of our staffing challenges, which is impacting our budget and our project deliberation and delivery.
Senior Manager Parker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Actually, I think there's an agenda item in the semi-annual report with some information that speaks directly to our recruitment situation. We do have a few difficult to fill positions, but as I think you've heard a few times this morning as well, we've recently been back on track for some success stories too. So we're continuing to try everything we can do to make progress, but we have been challenged. And as I think you'll see in the semi-annual report, a few factors, housing actually being one of them, and the affordability of housing is causing some challenges. And we're not alone, right? It is, it's not just a BC-wide issue, it's a Canada-wide. In fact, it's probably a worldwide issue around certain categories. But we're keeping at it. We're getting creative. We're modifying jobs. We're making changes. We're doing everything we can, and we're seeing some success stories along the way. So more to come. But yeah, there are some challenges for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else up to and including 155? Okay, we are going to flip the page to lines 156 through 177. 156 through 177. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Line 171. I believe this is, I'm just trying to make sure that this mass communications is the Voyant Alert. And the question is, we received a Voyant Alert on the heat warning, so I'm just, which items will be using this communication method, and is there, who's controlling what's going to go out on it, I guess is the question, and if the heat warning can be used an example of how that process would work, or did work. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to, GM Hall, do you want to take that, or is?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's an operational policy respecting the use of this tool, and it provides authority to the Manager of Protective Services, along with it identifies a number of other staff positions that have access to the tool and a process for its use. And as a general comment, well, two general comments. One is it's only used in cases where an emergency operations center is activated. And secondly, the operational policy is actively reviewed as we use the tool, which this was our first non-test use this week. So we'll be reviewing afterwards with the idea that we want to keep our policy responsive and effective. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Hall. So it's used for the Emergency Operations Center activations, not necessarily for a public hearing. Just kidding. And once again, for anybody that is listening, you can sign up for Voyant Alert on www.scrd.ca. Anything else for up to line 177? Up to and including line 177. Okay, we're going to move on, finishing up our, from lines 178 through 183. 178 through 183. Okay, I see no hands. So I'm just going to ask if there's any questions or comments on the completed budget project statuses or budget projects, which there are. Oh, I love to see that there is a growing list of completed budgets, budget projects. That's always nice to see. So thank you to everyone that's working through those, because I know we've got quite a few going on there. Anything on the completed or the deferred projects? There's one item on the deferred, and that's just been deferred to 2023, but anything else on completed? Anything that anyone missed? Director Hiltz.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I really want to comment on the continuous improvement of the BPSR. I was looking back in our December one, and it was quite a different animal. And for me, I no longer, the paper copy is being terrific. It's working really nice. And I haven't been motivated to use the Excel spreadsheet and create my own. So I'm just giving some feedback. And I'd be interested if CAO has something to say about kind of this continuous improvement, because I find going through it much better, easier than a couple of years ago. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Hiltz. CAO McKinley?
Yeah, I certainly can't claim any credit for the actual improvements to the budget project status report, but staff have done an amazing job of continuing to try to make it better, more relevant, and more easily understood. So I really appreciate the comments.
Okay. Yes. Great. Okay, Director Hiltz, anything else? Or nope. Okay, great. Okay, so we will move on to number 5 on our agenda, which is Annex C, pages 108 through 114 of your package. And that is Board Constituency Expense Policy Update. Over to the CAO, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to bring this back to you. This was the companion piece to the board remuneration that was done some time ago now. It's taken us a while to get this back to you, and we're happy to have it in front of you today. And I've got, with help from our Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Officer, we're happy to take any questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And it was great to see the updates to this based on the conversations we've had. So I'm going to go over to Director McMahon first.
Yeah, sure. This is generally looking very good. On page 112, where am I? Under the list of constituency expenses, you may want to consider under support for producing newsletters and or maintaining a constituency website. Some people do, some people don't. On page 113, there's a reference to constituency expenses that occur after a campaign period starts. And so it wasn't clear to me what happened. Is it just that they're not reimbursed in the 2-week period, or are they not reimbursed at all? Or what happens? That was item 4.8.
So item 4.8 on page 113. And then we'll go back to the other ones because we need clarity around that first.
Could I just, for the sake of myself and the corporate officer, and fortunately I also have our chief election officer sitting beside me too. What is the specific question?
It says, in an election year, constituency expenses must be submitted prior to the campaign period, which is generally established 28 days prior to the election. So what happens about constituency expenses that you incur between the beginning of the campaign period and the end of the term in office.
So constituency expenses are not reimbursed as part of your election expenses. We have what is called the quiet period. And so any sitting elected officials may not access any constituency funds to support their election campaigns. So that's what that section refers to.
Yes, but what if you had constituency expenses that are not related to the election campaign?
Or if you're a director who's not running for re-election.
Yeah, that would be another good example. So you're still using your cell phone or whatever.
So I think this is meant to refer to constituency expenses that are used explicitly for campaigning for election. Although we do encourage directors to wind down their constituency activities, to really keep a separation between what you're doing in terms of campaigning versus the continuation of routine SCRD business. And perhaps we could put some clarity in there, but it refers specifically to expenses around the election campaign. They will not be reimbursed.
Director McMahon, follow up on that?
Yeah, I think there could be a little more clarity there because there is a clear difference between an election expense and a constituency expense like driving to board meetings because the board meetings do continue.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
And just to clarify, that would be SCRD board business, not constituency expense. That example you provided, driving to a board meeting, that would be considered board business.
Yes. This is actually, we had a bit of a discussion at this agenda review on what the difference is between a constituency expense and a board expense. So coming to the board office or going on a board sanctioned meeting, like for example with our MLA or our MP that the board is supportive of, would be considered board business. But meeting with, if meeting with your community association would be considered a constituency expense. Meeting with a constituent that may have a question, like going out for coffee with a constituency member who has questions on how to navigate the regional district for something that's specific to Area E would be considered a constituency expense. But anything that is a board sanctioned, so committee meetings, board meetings, meetings that we've set up, or even your external appointments, like for example, you're the Chamber of Commerce rep from the SCRD for Gibson. So that would be considered board expense, not constituency expense. I will continue through the speakers list. I have Director Seegers and then Director Hiltz.
Thank you. When I look at page 112 as well, it talks about constituency office expenses. So I'm not clear about things like our internet, our Zoom accounts, things like that. Are those constituency expenses? Are those board expenses? Like, how do we determine between the two? Because some of those are required to continue to do the business that we have to do up to the election. And I guess what I'm pointing to is I would also support something slightly clearer in 4.8.
Okay, and then also with 4.3, Director McMahon had brought up about newsletter and website assistance as part of a constituency expense. CAO.
Thank you for the question. I'm wondering, Director Seegers, if the first bullet on page 113, which is the last bullet of 4.3, does that provide the clarity on phone, internet expenses?
Well, it does, except what we're saying is as of 28 days before, they can no longer be submitted.
Oh, okay, sorry. So your question was in relation to that 28-day period?
Yes.
So we can look at 4.8 then. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, and then the other piece around that is when is this looking at being implemented? Would this be immediately upon passing?
Upon board adoption. So if it's put direct to board today, it would be, otherwise it will be adopted in September.
May I have a point of clarification?
Yes, please go, CFO.
Yeah, actually, it was discussed that we implement this for the new board. Because this is quite a significant change. And so it's a change of policy as well, of course. And so we are recommending that this be applied for the new board.
Okay. Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm kind of going down the same road, but I'm starting up in terms of the definition of the constituency business, where it talks about political activities of a director. And I'm uncomfortable with that phrase in that the difference between a political activity and a political decision, political activities to me, it seems to be more about getting elected. And my understanding is that our roles here should be non-partisan, and even just lining up with I'm looking at our remuneration report, and the language was something like constituency expenses must be incurred as a result of SERD business and the duties of the office of the director. So I'm finding it not in the right place, that constituency allowance and expenses shouldn't be about political activities. It should be about assistance to constituency. And I'm getting kind of mixed messages as I'm going, so right now I could send out a political message before 28 days, right, saying I want to get elected, and that's a constituency expense. I don't think that that's what we're intending, because I think that's how it's written. I could at any point say, run a campaign now before the election period, and that would constitute a constituency business expense. So I'm uncomfortable with that phrase, that term political activities.
I can understand that. And I think it depends on your perspective of the definition of political activities, because sometimes, I'll use the instance of, well, I won't, there's sometimes that your area may wish a certain thing to happen that you may need to do some lobbying with the other directors and finding out information about what's going forward. So it's a little p political, not a big p political is the way I see it, for my perspective of it. I can understand the discomfort with the word, though, because political can be a very dirty word and politics can be a very dirty word. CFO, I see your hand is up. Did you, or that was with the previous item, or, yep, okay. Director Toth, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I hadn't actually even caught the political comment there until Director Hiltz mentioned it. It really should be clarified, because how you see it, how I see it, how Director Hiltz sees it, it shouldn't be open to an interpretation. One other thing that I did want to point out in here, there's a couple of spots where it mentions the beginning of the term, which works great for the rural area directors, because they're elected, they serve for 4 years, and then they run again or not. The municipal directors can be appointed or changed more or less at any point through the 4 years. So I don't know if it needs to be clarified that, within 2 years of the election, or whether, a municipal director that's appointed 3 years into the term is eligible. I'm just not sure. Thank you.
In regards to the
There's a couple spots.
Yeah.
Talks mostly around devices and technology and,
yeah,
one-off purchases.
okay. Okay, so that's an interesting point too. Yeah. Anything else, Director Toth, or no? Okay. Director Seekers?
Thank you. I'm looking at the constituency business, and I think what we're indicating is election related. Like, that's the distinction, right? So it could be non-election related business of a director, including actions on behalf of constituents' interests within their electoral area. That it's not, because it is, what we do is political. What we do is political, but what we're trying to identify is that we do not use the SCRD funds to fund our campaign if we're running again. So it's all to do with election rather than political. So I'm offering that as an alternative.
I'm hearing a lot of, Director Hiltz and Director Toth, does that satisfy some of your concerns? Go ahead. I know Director McMahon's on deck, so.
I would be just about happy just not having that phrase in at all. It's about acting on behalf of the constituents. That's where my constituency assistance is. And yeah, the connotations around political and that this is a discretionary amount, right? This is also what's not in this, is it's at the discretion of the director how to spend this money. And it's not really kind of listed in there is that, you know, this is, if the CAO doesn't like it, he can not approve it, but I'm not sure about the discretion aspect of this, right? Who gets to decide what's a valid expense? And I think there's it's in, you know, if you take the provincial model, they call it about discretionary constituency allowance. So there's this discretion of how to spend this, which advertising costs, how I do it. And I don't see that in there, is that the discretion lies with the director in here.
So I'm wondering, maybe just to even simplify it, is business that pertains to the activities of a director when acting on behalf of constituent interests within the electoral area. Simplifies CAO?
It's not time sensitive. I'm wondering, we've got clearly some clarification to do on 4.8 and some good ideas. We're happy to receive more, but staff would be happy to bring this back for reconsideration in September, potentially with a recommended recommended that it would start in the new year with the new board.
Okay, Director Seekers?
Thank you. I'll make a recommendation this be referred back to staff to come back in September with changes to the sections identified at the meeting.
Okay. And I see that. Whoops, I see that seconded. Any further comments that anybody wanted to bring up? I think those were the sticking points, and yeah. So I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we are going to move on to number 6 on our agenda, Annex D, pages 115 through 117 of your package, the draft director email policy. So over to our corporate officer, Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Chair. A change in process with respect to directors' correspondence routing has resulted in an increase in the volume of email that is now being directly received by directors. And this has highlighted the need to implement more process around the management of those emails, some of which might be classified as corporate records. The proposed policy sets out a framework for director email management to help ensure we are aligned with our legislative requirements and responsibilities under SCRD's Records and Information Bylaw, as well as the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And once adopted, staff will follow up with further information in terms of having a guideline or a procedure that will assist directors with the implementation of this policy. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Terrific. Director Seekers.
Thank you. Following up from our previous conversation, if we look at the definitions under number 3 on page 116, constituency correspondence may need some revision as well to take out the political activities piece, but I'm putting that to the board.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I did look at that and going, but I do separate out the expense, the allowance versus the record. So I was okay with it here, but it's the expense rather than what's in those emails. So I was wondering about tinkering with that, and I decided not to. Thanks.
Director Seekers.
Thank you. So I'll make a comment first and then I'll move the recommendation. When this was brought up in our agenda review, we talked to the fact that when we have a new, well, actually before the end of this term, I think we as directors need some more clarity around which are records and not, given that all the email for those who aren't going to be staying on will be deleted, and we need to ensure that the records are retained by the regional district. And then also some training for the new staff coming in with actual examples so that we can say, yes, this is a record, and no, this is not. So as I'm not clear of what is and what isn't, so I don't know if anybody else is. So I'll move the recommendation as presented on page 115.
Okay, did you wish to amend that political activities piece in there?
No, I think if Director Hiltz is okay, I'm good with it too, thanks.
Okay, so Director Seegers moves that. Do I have I see a seconder. Any further comments or questions on that? And I think Director Hiltz's comment about there is definitely a distinction between expenses and email, and as he mentioned, Director Hiltz?
Yeah, it was in the citations, it was talking about the records management aspect, and in there's nothing. Talks about employees, and there might be a place in there to talk about that separation from the because we're not employees here, so there might be a place in there to kind of also clarify it. So that was something that I was thinking about is. I'm not an employee. I don't create corporate records. So yeah, I think the clarification on what's what is important, and that might be another place to look at. So that's just a comment. Thanks.
Okay. So with that, I am going to call the question on that motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Up next, item number 7, Area A Food Waste Drop-Off and Processing Program Update. So we're going to go over to GM Rosenboom for an introduction to this, and then just for everyone to be aware, we're going to have the introduction for it now. Because directors just received the report this morning, we're going to be referring this to board and having further discussion then at board, and then that way directors can form questions and et cetera about it. So GM Rosenboom, over to you for an introduction on Area A Food Waste Drop-Off, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Brad. The purpose of this report is to present the committee with the results of a recent tender to establish a food waste drop-off area service for Area A. As part of the 2020 budget process, an annual budget of $45,000 was approved for the service, which is to be funded 50-50 from eco-fee reserves and tipping fees. While the request for proposals explicitly stated that proposals to process the food waste itself in Area A was preferred, the sole bid received proposed to collect the food waste at the Pender Harbor transfer station and haul the materials to the Sechelt for processing. The report outlines 2 options for the committee's consideration, of which the first one is to establish the service as proposed by the bid and establish associating tipping fees for food waste and combined loads of municipal solid waste and food waste. Such service could be established by October 1st or soon thereafter. If this would be considered, staff will report back after 1 year of the pilot being implemented with a comparison between the budgeted and the actual financial implication of the service. The second option is to defer the question on the establishment of the service to the solid waste management plan update process that is currently being initiated. And I'm happy to answer any questions now or later today. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to stop the questions now and just ask that they all be referred to board. So I'll ask for a motion to refer the report and discussion to board this afternoon. So over to Director Seegers makes that motion. And may I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And GM Rosenboom, we will see you this afternoon. Well, we are this afternoon already, but we'll just pretend we're morning still. Moving on, number 8 on our agenda package, Annex E, pages 118 through 119, contracts between 50,000 and 100,000. So this is a report for that we have received, and if there's any questions that we have. I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any there. Nobody's jumping up. Okay, so up next, Annex F, pages 120 through 121 of the package, Director's Constituency and Travel Expenses for period ending June 30th, 2022. Number 9 on our agenda page. No questions. Moving on. Annex G, pages 122 through 153, number 10 on the package. The Corporate and Administrative Services update first half 2022, Corporate and Administrative Services team. And we're just going to bid adieu to Director Toth as he must go. So, adieu. So long, farewell, at Wiedersehen. Good night? No, not yet? Okay. All right. Okay, so our Corporate Administrative Services first, I'll go over to the CAO, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Happy to provide this update to directors. As you'll see, there are some new KPIs and stats, so another part of the ongoing continuous improvement process. There's a lot here. The senior leadership team is happy to take your questions. Thank you.
And thank you, and appreciate the new format as well. It makes it very much easier. That just seems grammatically incorrect, but it's so much there easier to read. So I'll go to directors. Any questions for staff on the Corporate and Administrative Services first half update for 2022? Looking to electronic or physical hands. Things thrown at my head. Anything in there? Okay, Director McMahon and then Director Seekers.
Right, around page 126 or 7, when we're looking at the website and Let's Talk SCRD, just a suggestion that we could put some a more intuitive link to Let's Talk SCRD on the main page of the website. Also, when I look for maps, under the quick links menu, in alphabetical order, maps is actually under W for web mapping, so I didn't find it the first 6 or 10 times I was looking for it. So just a couple of things like that to make it a little bit easier to use. But that's really good. And I also wanted to say there's some very interesting information in this report. And one more question while I'm at it. On page 142, what on earth is a GRTW? I couldn't figure that one out.
I think that's Senior Manager Parker can answer that, our king of acronyms.
Yeah, and I received a reminder this week that when sending in reports, one should really try to avoid acronyms. So my thanks to those that reminded me. Graduated Return to Work is actually what that stands for. And this is people that aren't yet ready to come back to their full duties, but they start on the path towards full recovery. And there's quite a few of those that happen every year. So that's what it means. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Director Seekers?
Thank you. Yes, I did note that there were still some acronyms in there that weren't addressed, so more attention to that would be beneficial. And I mean, I know these are reports not just for us, right? These are for the community. So there were a number of them in there. I knew what they meant, but somebody new coming in, and particularly we're going into new election. We're going to have a lot of new people here. We need to have everybody be aware of that. Good to know about the firefighters' benefits coming into effect or having come into effect. Other than that, I just say thank you for the report. There's a lot of really good information in here.
Director McMahon and then Director Ties.
Right, sorry, on page 148, I just had a couple of quick questions. What is this is another, what is a support request ticket? And I'm trying to think what the context was there going back. It's at the top of the page. It says number of support request tickets, and that's before IT. That's actually purchase orders, I think it was. And then under IT, I noticed some new equipment for the landfill. So do we have power up at the landfill yet? I remember we were supposed to have a power line going to the landfill, and I don't remember if we ever got it.
Okay, CFO, did you want to take those questions or?
Yes, we have 2 support ticketing systems, one for purchasing and risk management requests to keep track of those. So that was newly implemented for 2022. And so they keep track of service requests internally. And we keep statistics related to that. So that's good new information that we're tracking, as well as our help desk that we have for our various software modules, as well as technical requests that are sent in. So that's our service request needs that you would aptly see. And then from new equipment, I don't know if GM Rosenboom has left, but know that particular project to get the electrification up, or electricity up to the landfill has not been implemented yet. However, we still have the generator that's on loan, I believe temporarily from the remediation project, but there's other various equipment to support various equipment such as Moneris machines and the software systems, the scale system. So various equipment was replaced to support those systems. So having stable power systems would be a benefit. So I think that's still on the docket.
Okay, great. Director Ties and then Director Hiltz.
Yes, thank you. I just want to mention and congratulate staff for the grievance activity report, and on page 142, it seems that they've come down considerably, especially when you start looking at the previous term. So maybe we can take some credit too, but I think the credit should go to staff, and well done. Thank you.
Okay, Director Hiltz and then Director Seegers.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm actually I was overwhelmed by the new information on the report, and my apologies. I have not been able to give it my due attention. And it's a semi-annual report, so this will be the last one coming from this department in this term, as I understand it. Is that I think that's correct. Yeah. So I'm going to spend more time on it, but there's a lot to adjust to, actually, compared to where it was. So thanks for that, and I'm looking forward to spending more time on it. Thanks.
Director Seegers, please.
This will be quick, just a comment. I just want to thank you for the emerging issues piece under each. That, just gives a heads up, look, we're dealing with this. I mean, in one, it's talking about, IT staff. And we know through COVID, I think we've all realized, and everybody's realized, the importance of IT support to everything that we're doing. So we can see how that's impacting. But so that emerging issues piece is really good. Thank you for including that.
Yes, I would agree as well. It's always good to, it's like our manager of communication says, let them see us coming. CAO McKinley.
Yes, thank you for those observations. One thing I did forget at the beginning when I did the very briefest of introductions was, in addition to a lot of the new statistics and some of the new key performance indicators, the biggest change in the format of this is to make it far more closely aligned with our divisional and departmental service plans. So that's the biggest change, and we're the improvements will keep coming, hopefully.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. On page 146, it talks about us being placed into a PACE program. Is that good, bad, or routine?
I can answer it in a cursory way, and I know Senior Manager Parker already referenced it, but that is a WorkSafe initiated program, and I see Senior Manager Parker's right there. So Jerry, if you'd like to, you can explain better than I can what PACE is. Other than we're very happy to participate.
Manager Parker, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, CEO McKinley. The Program and Committee Evaluation acronym PACE is not SCRD's. It's actually the WorkSafe BC acronym. So the PACE program is something WorkSafe does when they are looking at areas where they're seeing perhaps a benefit towards organizations getting more actively involved in improving their safety management system. You'll see in the reports there some indicators on the number of claims over the years. You'll see through our experience rating as we get into budget that all of these things impact. And you'll see that we're pursuing core certificate of recognition such that we can really get our safety standards, not just to the bare minimum requirements, but above and beyond, to really move forward in a way to prevent injuries, to make sure our programs are running as effectively as possible. The spin-off effect is that it will actually result in a reduction of premiums. In one year after implementation, the amount of work, though, to get it into effect is monumental, and it involves the whole organization. So being placed into the program was WorkSafe's idea. Participating in the program, it's our pleasure, and we'll continue to work with WorkSafe BC. They're going to be dropping in every couple of weeks or so, and we're happy to move this forward in a meaningful way. Thank you.
I kind of thought it was good news, but we missed it, so thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more hands raised for the Corporate Administrative Services first half update for the first half of 2022. So thank you to the Corporate Administrative Services team, the entirety of you, and for the report. And with that, we will move on. We have no communications or new business. We will be moving in camera. So I know our gallery is empty, but for anybody that is watching that would like to ask a question, we'll make our motion to go in camera, and then we will allow for an opportunity for questions. So before we go in camera, I would also like a motion to bring in the alternate director from Area A to the in-camera session, please. So moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So, and then I will now ask for a motion to go in camera that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91G and K of the Community Charter. So moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Have any questions come in from the audience? Seeing none, I will ask our IT support to place this in confidential, please. And welcome back to your Committee of the Whole for the Sunshine Coast Regional District of July 28th, 2022. We've reached the end of our agenda, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn, please. So moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. Thank you for joining us today.